This program is brought to you by Emory University.
Well, welcome back to the last session, but I think it's the most interesting session. The focus of the session, as the committee was organizing, was the mutual business opportunities of U.S. companies going to India and Indian companies coming over here, and what are the challenges that they face in the process. We originally had planned 3 speakers or 3 panelists, all of them excellent, obviously. One of them could not make it, so it'll be only 2. One is, in fact, representing the Lockheed Corporation right from here, and that's Abhay Paranjape. And I'll give a little background on Abhay, and then also the background on Ashok and Vemuri. Abhay is actually the director in charge of that C-30 plane that the State Department speaker spoke about. And Abhay has been involved before that one with F-16 fighter plane at General Dynamics, which eventually sold to Lockheed, and he's been here. Abhay has got his bachelor's degree from India and a master's degree from University of Houston. I've asked Abhay to see if he can focus about not only the opportunity that we already learned quite a lot, but what are the challenges and what are the bigger issues that they might have in terms of the alignment between the 2 nations. Ashok is a very young person, quite part of the Infosys, which is a very well-known IT services company, very global, probably one of the best brands in the IT business out of India on a worldwide basis. And he's a member also of the Executive Council, which is the top management group that works together on a global basis. Excellent background. He joined Infosys from Bank of America. He's actually not only in charge of all the operations of Western Hemisphere, both North America, South America, but also, in fact, in charge of the financial services or banking and financial services, BFSI, as they call it, as an area. Both of them are obviously brilliant people in their own right. I did want to mention a couple of things. My own association with both of them is totally vicarious. First of all, I did work at General Dynamics as an advisor on the indirect offset, which was primarily President Marcos in Philippines was begging for weapons, just like what Stephen Cohen mentioned, more to fight the insurgents and the guerrilla warfare is kind of an issue, more tactical weapons, more paramilitary. And of course, Philippines government has no money to pay. So it's called an indirect offset, and I worked on the project that if, in fact, Philippines gives the tourism business to somebody in America, is that an exchange that one can value, et cetera. It was a very fascinating project, and had a great time to learn quite a lot about the defense industry. GD, as you know, was probably one of the largest aggregators of all of the defense companies at one time, and aspired to become one of the top ones, surpassing Boeing, which was primarily civilian at that time, Lockheed on the other hand. And of course, they bought Electric Boat, which was the submarine area in San Diego, the F-16 fighter plane, and in the process of acquiring too many companies, actually it collapsed financially. So it had to break up into pieces. Interesting background. So I was very fascinated by Abhay's own background coming from that side. Infosys, of course, is a Bangalore-based company. 2 great rivals, more like 2 great athletes, 2 great tennis players, for example, who challenge each other and get more out of them. And that is the kind of almost a friendly rivalry, if one can use that word, between Wipro on the one hand and Infosys. They benchmark against each other. In fact, they even share information publicly available with each other, et cetera, and sort of look at best in practices kind of stuff. So Wipro is a great admirer of Infosys, and Infosys also is a great admirer of Wipro. And I'm connected with Wipro, as I mentioned. And the last comment is the most interesting one, how the 2 come together. I've been forecasting that Bangalore will be less and less identified as the IT capital of India and more as an aerospace capital of India. So here we have an IT company and an aerospace company essentially switching the roles about a city, both will be focusing on. So with all that, I will just ask Abhay to take the lead and talk about his experiences, share with the audience, and then we will have Ashok do the same thing, and then we will open up for questions and answers, and that's the format pretty much. Let's give a big hand.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Sheth. Let me, talk a little bit about the Lockheed Martin connection with India and what we are doing. The Indian Air Force has not bought any aircraft products, any major platforms from the U.S. in over 50 years now. And it has consistently been buying equipment and systems from Russia, some from France, some from UK, but not anything from the US. Over the past decade, we have started seeing a change in that. There is a change in all those strategic partnerships, alliances. What was it Dr. Cohen said? A natural alliance is beginning to form. There is a thawing of relationships, if you will. And the first program to tee this relationship off, has been the C130. So the C130J, the J is the most modern, recent version of the aircraft that we've developed, has been the first, pathfinder, if you will, a groundbreaker, if you will, in developing this relationship. The reason it's important is also more than just that 50-year thing. It's also because it's a project where the Indian government has essentially asked Lockheed Martin to do everything. We are building the aircraft, we are delivering the aircraft, we are training their pilots, we are training the maintainers. Over 100 maintainers have been here through Lockheed Martin in Marietta and through the U.S. Air Force facilities. We are also building a complete base over in India. The complete infrastructure, the hangars, the fuel facilities, the engine run facilities, a training schoolhouse. We are building a full motion WST, weapon systems trainer, which is a complete full motion simulator that once the pilot goes through that, they can straight away start flying the aircraft. We are building that at Hindon Air Force Base near Delhi. We're also responsible for maintaining the aircraft, which is another point of departure here. We have been given the contract to support, sustain, and maintain the aircraft, including having our field service representatives working with the Indian Air Force for the next 3 years right now, and then eventually for a longer-term contract. So it's a total turnkey project. And the reason it's important is because, like I said, there is a relationship building here between the U.S. companies and between the Indian Air Forces and Indian government. That trust, forming that trust and forming that relationship is so important. The Indians, the armed forces, have such a good relationship with the Russians that they need to have that same comfort feeling with the American companies. They need to have that same feeling of saying, we can depend on the U.S. companies to deliver on their promises, to deliver on time, deliver on budget, and perform. And until now, we have been successful. The project started in 2008. We promised them that we would be able to deliver the first aircraft in less than 3 years. This is a special aircraft. It's been modified and specially fitted with equipment for the India Special Operations Forces. So it's not a normal C-130J. It's a C-130J that's been specially, uniquely equipped with what are their special equipments for things like anti-terror operations, being able to detect locations, fly through night and through hills and valleys in the dark of the night, being able to land just about anywhere. It would not need a runway. It can land on unprepared surfaces. So it is a very unique capability that the Indian Air Force is acquiring. We promised that we would deliver this aircraft in 3 years and under cost, something that the Indian Air Force, frankly, is not used to. It is used to seeing delays all the time. It's used to seeing projects go over the budget. And I can proudly say that we did it. We delivered the aircraft in December, actually, 2 months ahead of schedule. The first 2 aircraft actually were delivered in December, and we are under budget. The first aircraft has now been delivered to Hindon Air Force Station. We also flew it to Bangalore this last month for the Yelahanka Aero India show, and was a great success there, was very successful. The second aircraft will be flying out of Marietta, Georgia here sometime in March. We have delivered the third aircraft. In fact, today, this afternoon, we delivered the third aircraft. So we are way ahead of schedule, and we are under cost. So that is sort of what I think a new model that the Indian Armed Forces are now beginning to see and realize. Working with American companies is going to provide them capability that they can count on and they can depend on being delivered on time and ahead of schedule or under budget. So that is sort of the scope of the project. The challenges side, it has been a different experience for us, mainly because of no existing infrastructure, no history. So flying the aircraft over there, we needed to have digital maps and data for all these countries in between that the Indian Air Force wanted to fly through. Visa restrictions, I mean, things that you don't even think about are becoming challenges for us. We're being able to get visas in time and having those people, having their pilots appear here and start being trained. Even that simple thing has become a challenge for us sometimes. Transportation has been a major challenge. Getting goods and services, we are responsible for the next 3 years of support and service. So how do you get goods and how do you get spare parts to Air Station Hindon from here in time, and then repairs and parts returned back? There is not a very good supply chain that exists between here and India. That's been a huge challenge for us. We had to go through a lot of different exercises to go figure out how to get a freight forwarder that could guarantee us that they would be able to navigate through all the small things like octroi duties and customs duties and things like that in India and still get the parts on time so that we could perform on our commitments. So those have been the challenges of bureaucracy. Dr. Cohen mentioned earlier about the civilian side and the military side. That has been another challenge. Working with the Ministry of Defense, working with the Indian Air Force, 2 different sets of priorities. The strategic priorities sometimes don't match with the Air Force tactical requirements. Getting those to be aligned correctly. Working with the 2 Air Forces and getting the U.S. Air Force and the Indian Air Force to agree on documents, agree on principles, agree on being able to share collaboratively has been a challenge that has been, and it continues to be a challenge. So those are the major issues that we deal with. Mutual opportunities. I think the biggest thing that we have seen is the Indian industry is now coming of age, and there is a little bit of a warming up, if you will, within the Indian government to opening up defense manufacturing to private sector companies, as opposed to working only with the Hindustan Aeronautics or Bharat Electronics and the public sector companies. The private sector industry is now beginning to start, putting a foot forward, and they have tremendous capability. They may not have aerospace capability, but they have manufacturing, they have systems, they have processes in place, they have great talent, and that's what we are working on now building. We have formed alliances with Mahindra. We also formed a joint venture. Lockheed Martin just formed a joint venture with Tata, and we will start manufacturing in India here pretty soon with this joint venture that we are working with. We've also formed alliances with Bharat Electronics and several other smaller companies within India. So those are the opportunities for growth. Now, getting a little bit, changing the tactic here from aerospace to internal security. That's where I think the biggest mutual opportunity growth is going to be. Our country has also focused on homeland security. And as Dr. Cohen mentioned, internal security for India is going to be a big issue also. That internal security means more than just platforms. It's buying networking, it's building up the infrastructure, it's connecting multiple services. How do you connect when there is a terrorist attack like that happened in Mumbai? How do you get information, the right information, to the right paramilitary forces, police forces, fire, the hospitals, emergency services, all of that, and tying all that together is a huge, huge market. It's a big market for US companies where we have a lot of expertise. Companies like Lockheed Martin, but also companies like Infosys or Wipro and others have got tremendous capabilities that I think need to be really explored. There is a huge market out there that companies from the US can really help India with and form collaborations on. India is right now looking very eagerly, very actively at those opportunities. What can be done to tie in the railway system, the airport system, the air system, the defense system, all into one network? Something that provides a big networked, a big picture, if you will, for management of emergencies, management of terrorist attacks or insurgent attacks or whatever is happening with the Nakshals, for example, in the eastern part of the country. Those are the kind of things that India is really focused on. And that internal security piece is still missing in terms of what American companies have really explored in forming collaborative relationships. That's where I think the big collaboration opportunities are for the future, in addition to the big name platforms that we know about. So that's, in my opinion, the market mutual opportunity we should explore.
Thank you.
Sure.
You use the podium, that's fine.
No, I think I'll use. I have no prepared remarks, so I'm just going to give you a brief idea, and then hopefully we'll cover some more ground as through the Q&A. And first of all, thank you very much for inviting me, and thank you for your kind words, Professor Sheth. So let me actually start by talking a little about Infosys, and I think there's some that's written about it, some probably you know, and a lot probably you don't. Infosys started about 31 years ago with a seed capital of about $240, which if you ask our chairman, he sold his wife's jewelry. And if you ask his wife, she'll tell you that, I had no choice. From that beginning, it's a $6 billion company today, a market cap of about, depending on where NASDAQ is, about $40 billion, which is a higher market capitalization than a lot of our American competitors. We do about 65% of our business out of the United States. We've about close to 17,000 people in the United States, 130,000 people company. And we operate in about 46 countries, 25 offices in the United States, and 18 development centers, which house about 100 to 150 people. One of the things that we're really proud about, and I'll talk a little about how we started our journey in the US and the challenges and the opportunities it does provide. One of the things that we're extremely proud of, actually two of them that I want to highlight here, one is that we have an internship program that's probably one of the largest internship programs for a corporation in US campuses. It's an internship program which is about 11 years old. And we take people from as interns into our campuses in Mysore, which if you ever get an opportunity, you should go see. It's the largest single-site structure built in India post-independence. It's about 1 million square feet, where we actually train about 15,000 people in intern. The other is that we have started promoting education, and I'll talk a little about that in the United States through grants to institutions such as the New York Academy of Sciences for STEM education, which we believe is something that is probably underfunded, and something that we think would be to our benefit if we are able to promote a culture of science, technology, engineering, and math in this country, to the extent that we can be able to do that. So Infosys actually, started in 1981 for the first 20 years, basically middling along $100 million at the 1999 timeframe. And the US was not our first choice of destination. We tried to do this in India. We tried to do this closer home, where you didn't have to fly 24 hours in those days and experience 10 hours of jet lag. But we're completely unsuccessful. For one, in India, the adoption of technology and the usage of technology was very limited. In the 80s and the 90s, the only people who actually used technology to an extent were public sector companies, which was not something that was did not fit into our business model. Y2K happened. We saw there was a huge opportunity here for remediation and an opportunity to actually bring the global delivery model, essentially leveraging labor arbitrage, if you will. And we've been in the US now for a fairly long period of time, of course, with greater success as we piggybacked on the growth of the US economy in the first half of the 21st century, and then obviously have suffered as well as it continued to dip. And the reason, of course, we picked US, and we've always had this strategy, and probably much more successful in companies that are more Anglophonic than others, is, of course, the fact that in India, the predominant spoken language or language of education, if you will, is English. There was a commonality in terms of contractual law, so English common law is what's practiced in both countries. For the fact that this was a technologically heavily invested country, some of our banks, and I run the financial services business, actually call themselves technology companies rather than companies that move money or are banks. So there was a greater investment in technology, and I think probably the most important thing, which we probably don't celebrate as much as we should, was GE. GE under Jack Welch in the mid to late 70s started what is known as a 70-70-70 program, where he essentially said that non-core functions of GE, 70% of them, should be outsourced. And of that 70% should go to India. So he had this strategy where he said that we are going to start investing in a country which has a strong educational foundation, a strong human resources that understands technology, is well-educated, speaks English. And that's essentially how a large number of the technology sourcing companies began to piggyback or to learn from this particular model. GE is not a client of ours, so I can speak very freely about it. And that essentially actually how it started in terms of a labor arbitrage. So today our global delivery model is such that we can take any piece of work from anywhere in the world and throw it to anywhere in the world and essentially get it done seamlessly without anybody knowing which component of that work or which component of a particular project is done where. We started by saying that India so we essentially sold in by saying, a bunch of smart people who understand technology, they can code for you. We're going to do it in an economy where the price is probably a sixth or a tenth of what you would pay here because of the rise of telecom, the fact that there were enough optical fibers, there were satellites, there were undersea cables, etc. We can actually do this. And the story went that, while you were sleeping, you did your work in the daytime here in the US, you went to sleep, it got shipped to a place where the sun was rising, and it would get done, and by the time you came back to work the next day, you would have it completed. So essentially, it was a model also called as follow the sun model. And then we expanded that model, obviously, to accommodate the entire planet. So we started work when Japan woke up, and we actually carried that to India, then to Europe, and then to the US, and all the way back. Today, of course, we are at a very interesting inflection point because we now find that it's cheaper to do work in the US. So instead of Bangalore is such an expensive place that it's cheaper to actually do it in lots of parts of the US. And I think we are finding that the model of labor arbitrage continues to exist, but also the fact that proximity to our clients or being able to set up centers where it makes economic sense still rides true. So we, along with some of our other colleagues from India, are very aggressively looking to set up development centers in the United States because it's cheaper. There's some sort of talent availability, and there is a lot of interest if we do that. But also what it does is, and that I think is one of the impediments or challenges that we have faced. Of course, the first one about 15 years ago when we showed up at a client, if you were an Indian, you either were a professor or a taxi driver. So if you didn't fit in between those two, people would be really surprised and say, oh, really? You're going to take this technology work all the way to where again? And do. So I think breaking that myth about what can be done in India, I think has been a huge success for us, was a huge challenge at that time. The second, of course, is the availability of talent. If we operate in India, in China, in many other countries, and we think that from a talent availability perspective, from a pure technology knowledge perspective, if you are in India and China, you essentially cover 2/3 of the world, and you probably never have to worry about having to employees and resources. But clearly, there is an interest for us to be in the United States for two essential reasons, even though we worry, and which is why we're investing in STEM education in this country, is the fact that seems to be a significant decline in the last 10 to 12 years of students who are actually going into the technology stream or who are willing to work on technology stream. But what we really want to capture, which I think is something that we all believe is extremely essential, is that the education system provides a significant amount of, puts a premium, let me put it that way, to innovation and thinking out of the box, as against an education system in the parts of the world that I'm from, continues to rely on a significant amount of being told what to do and being able to do that very well. And as we find ourselves getting more and more into complex and core programs, we find that it is important for us to recruit talent in countries. So 12 years ago, I sat at Boston University for a recruitment day. 4 people walked up to me. None of them had heard about Infosys. Today, we hire from about 120 undergraduate schools. So last year, we hired about close to 400 people from undergraduate schools. We hired about 150 MBAs. That is a program that's not only being done by Infosys, the Wipro, the Tatas, everybody is essentially on that program, and that is something that we believe is also, apart from the need to acquire talent, the other big irritant that we have, apart from all the opportunities the US provides, is the fact that there is an increasing trend towards protectionism. I think the immigration debate and the usage, if you will, of work permits, I think nobody's ever been able to get a handle on that, and I think that continues to draw us, essentially makes me take the train every third or fourth day from New York, where I live, to Washington, D.C. We believe that, and we have experience today in multiple parts of the world, but we still believe that the U.S. is probably the one country that, and businesses in the U.S. are conducive to acquiring talent, irrespective of where you came from or what you look like or what language you speak. So unlike in other parts of the world, you do not have to be a German to be successful here. You don't have to look like a German, you don't have to look like a Frenchman, or you don't have to speak French to be successful in the US. And I think that essentially, to a great extent, has been the reason why companies such as ours have been extremely successful. But at the same time, we are worried, of course, about the challenges that keep coming up in terms of the heightened protectionism. I think we've spent a lot of time, let me take that before it actually becomes a question, and in terms of creating jobs, in terms of the fact that how we are creating quality. We actually believe that the huge impetus or the rediscovery by US companies of India, whether it's to set up technology centers or what they call captives, the interest in doing business is significantly fueled by companies such as Wipro, Tata's, Infosys, et cetera. And the reason for that is it elevated an entire class of people in India. This has huge implications for India, even though we do probably less than a percentage of business in India. It has elevated a huge class of people in India who are part of the technology world, who have found employment there. And between the NASSCOM details, which is the National Association of Software Companies, estimates that 85% of people in the BPO industry are first time in their family white-collar workers. So it's essentially people who have found a new opportunity or a new class of occupation, if you will, which has elevated the overall standing, overall quality of life. Just to give you an example, when our first team came back, this is somewhere in the late 90s from the US. They came back from a project with Goldman Sachs in New York, and they used to work late nights in financial services companies. They came back to India. This team of 20 people said, "You want us to work late? We need pizza." We actually had, the first Domino's Pizza Center in India was actually on the Infosys campus, because we suddenly realized that if these guys need to work hard and late, they were into the pizza culture. So I think the fact that there are a lot of pizza parlors in India and the Domino's, I think they need to give us some kind of royalty for that. But we really believe that...
Oh, buy them out.
They could, actually. But I think in terms of, we really believe that we have been, and I think the other reason why actually, and I think it's an important point to bring out, is the reason why we think we've been successful as an industry, ITES industry has been successful as an exporter of talent and as a generator of foreign currency in India, has been because the government never basically bothered us. They never really understood our business, never got into setting any regulations. And the fact that the government in India stayed away from our business was really the reason why we became successful. Now they're getting into it in terms of certain regulations, et cetera, but they also realize that this is the golden goose, and we generate a significant amount of money. The last thing that I also want to say is that if you look at any of the technology companies, one of the things that really strikes you when you look at them is that they have huge campuses, beautiful buildings. If you look at any of our Infosys campus, they have absolutely modern architecture, great campuses. And it's true for all the companies, and we buy a lot of real estate. And the reason behind that is important to understand, because when we were selling in to companies in the US, there was nothing tangible that we were bringing that they could touch and feel. We were not a product company, we were a services company. And to demonstrate to them that, this was a world-class, so if we would invite them to come to our offices in Bangalore, and by the time they took the car trip from the airport to our campus, they would probably, desperately want to go back, because it would take 3 hours to get there, and then it would be, it can be quite challenging if your worldview is constrained by the Western Hemisphere. So the thing we had to do was to build world-class facilities in order for people to say that in this environment too, there is opportunity for us to build these kind of facilities, which basically means that we can actually build great software and provide you great services, which is comparable to any part of the world. I'm open to take any questions.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you.
I would ask the audience. I have some questions, but later on. Yes, please. One here. Yeah.
I don't have much idea, so my question may be silly. But since these IT companies in India, they are doing very well. So, and since you were saying it's a service type of company, so are you also focusing on innovation where you can develop more products so that the growth will be sustainable growth for the economy?
Yeah, so two different parts to your question. One is on R&D. So we spend about 10% of our pre-tax profit, so to speak, on R&D research, and that R&D is distributed across multiple parts of the world. We have significant developed research centers here in the United States. We've tied up with multiple universities. We're part, for example, co-founded the MIT Media Lab to do some of the research that we want to do. And a lot of that research is, for example, in things which are services aligned, like cloud, for example. So cloud computing becomes a reality tomorrow, which it already actually is as we speak. We want to be invested in being at the forefront of that technology, because we do believe that's a fairly disruptive model. So if there is, for example, Barack Obama, when he went to India, said that the real reason, that the real issue, for example, with terrorism and the way to combat that is through the pipes of banks, because that's how the money is getting channeled. So we're making investments in creating solutions around anti-money laundering, et cetera. We build products, but a product mentality or a product DNA is extremely different from having a services DNA, and we are more of a services-oriented company. So we will build bespoke products which can be packaged along with our services, but we will not be a product company like a Cisco or some of the other companies.
Another question? Yeah.
This is for Mr. Vemuri. Can you talk a little bit about where you see the future of mobile commerce in India? So maybe in the rural context, because right now they may not have direct access to internet or even electricity at times, but they do have mobile phones and they do use that to maybe check prices of different commodities. Where do you see kind of mobile commerce and banking through cell phones going in India?
Yeah, see, that's a great question, because if you look at India, the penetration of mobile phones is extremely high. I mean, none of the mobile phone companies are ever going to make any money, because the way the way it's used in India. There are more people in India who have cell phones than there are people in this country. And the leapfrogging that's happened in India in terms of the use of mobile technology has been amazing. So whether it's, I don't know if you were brought up in India, I was, and I remember standing in lines which snaked all the way into, over 100 people trying to pay an electricity bill or to do a banking transaction. Today, if I go to India, I can pay my electricity bill on the phone. I can actually, for people who, so we have some solutions which we have tied up with some local banks. You know, innovation from the banking sector in India is quite amazing. If you look at banks like ICICI Bank, or if you look at, not even the private sector banks, but you look at the state banks of India, they are extremely robust in their use of technology. So for example, we have a cell phone solution which is essentially for rural people who can't read, and there's a significant population that cannot read. So their bank balance, the phone talks back to them with their bank balance. It basically says you have 20 rupees in your account. So of course there are privacy issues with that which don't really matter in India. But you could do a lot of those solutions. We are actually working on, we're doing two programs. One is we are part of a program that is actually trying to convert Singapore into a cashless society. So essentially, if you go to Singapore in about 2 years, you essentially walk around with a cell phone and you can do all your business. You show up at an airport, you want a Coke, you dial a number, the Coke pops out, your phone bill goes to T-Mobile or Verizon or whatever. And we're using a similar concept in India, where ITC actually started this thing with something called e-Chopal, which is essentially information for farmers in terms of where they could go and sell their grain, what the price, et cetera, was. And we are tied up on two fronts. One, of course, is the UID, which is the unique identification number akin to a social security number in this country, which is a huge program in India where there's some amount of technology enablement that's happening. And the other is income tax, which is, you know, if you look at India, it's only about 2% of the people actually pay income tax, and this is extremely low for a country that has a lot of people who are actually employed and who can pay. So identification, both from a fraud monitoring perspective. I mean, you can pay the income tax today on a cell phone. So fraud monitoring and fraud detection and actual identification. So if you have a cell phone, you should be filing income tax. So that connection. The other, from a rural perspective that you asked, is we have a solution which we have designed for India from an emergency notification perspective. So lots of the the east coast of India is extremely cyclone prone, and it takes a significant amount of time for them to get to know as to when that cyclone is happening, and usually they get to know after it has happened, and that's where they hear it on the radio. So there is what we have actually worked in conjunction with a company which is now deployed in Bangladesh as well as on the east coast of India, is that the cell phone and you know, the radios, a lot of people don't have radios, reception, etc. The cell phone actually vibrates. It's only meant for that. It vibrates if there is, or gives some kind of an alarm when there is an impending storm and things like that. So those are some of the applications that we are doing. But as I said, our penetration in India is fairly restricted at this point of time from a business perspective. But there are opportunities we see from you know, taking technology to make this much more of a level playing field in India.
Abhay, I have a question. Very clearly, the security business, especially internal security, whether it's a terrorism-oriented or any other way, and civil disasters, you know, that recovery systems, seems to be definitely more and more, not just physical, but also in some sort of a cyberspace, you know?
Yes.
So the two of you here in two different industries, otherwise, I sense a convergence in some fashion. Any forecast about that convergence and what's likely to happen?
Yes, I can talk a little bit about that, because just like, you know, Ashok was saying just now with the cyclones, let me use that as an example. The National Disaster Management Agency in India, which reports directly to the cabinet and the Prime Minister, they're seriously looking at how do you predict cyclones better. Now, if you look at what the United States has done since the 1960s, we have a technology that we have been using extensively, and from the 80s we've collected extensive amount of data on this also, for what are called hurricane hunters, which are essentially C-130 aircraft that are specially equipped to fly through hurricanes. And the aircraft basically flies a constant barometric pressure altitude. So it essentially goes through the eye of the hurricane, it descends into the eye, and then comes back on the other side. As it's doing that, it's dropping these parachutes, little parachute sensors that come out of the aircraft. The sensor, as it drops to the surface of the ocean, it's measuring wind speed, barometric pressure, the temperature as it goes through, and its GPS position. And it's relaying it back by radio to the aircraft. The aircraft then relays this through a satellite communication to the National Hurricane Center in Miami. There's also a interferometric radar on the aircraft which measures constant wind speed and temperature of the surface of the ocean. So as it flies through this hurricane, the aircraft is measuring all of these parameters and is sending it back again to the National Hurricane Center. This allows the National Hurricane Center to be able to predict a cyclone or a hurricane in the Atlantic to within 100 kilometers as opposed to 1,000 kilometers as to where it is going to go. So when you see on the Weather Channel, you see constant predictions of where hurricane is going to go and what the path is and whether it's strengthening or weakening. The satellites up in the space just basically give you a static picture from above of what that disturbance is looking like. But the hurricane hunters are what are giving you the depth of the data and information that allow you to provide more data on the cyclone itself. So the National Disaster Management Agency and the IMED-D, the Indian Meteorological Department, we just took the Hurricane Hunter there. We flew it over the Indian Ocean. We flew it up to the coast of Sri Lanka and back. And they're looking at doing the same kind of capability. But they want to do more than just cyclone hunting. They want to use the same aircraft for disaster management, for evacuation. If there is a tsunami, they want to be able to drop parachutes and be able to drop airdrops very accurately. Also be able to tie in with other satellite communications. India is now exploring whether they can develop like this a cyclone center that is also tied in through satellites to all these multiple assets and can use some of these technologies that Ashok just talked about, being able to give accurate predictions and warnings, timely warnings to fishermen or whoever may be on the coast, and avoid loss of life, loss of property and damages. So internal security means more than just homeland security in that sense. In my mind, autonomic vehicles, robotic vehicles, being able to have something that can go in if there is a chemical strike or a biological weapon of some kind, being able to have some autonomous vehicles that can go in and be able to find what is going on, be able to transmit that information back to a command and control center. So what is called C4I in the United States, command, control, computers and communication and intelligence, tying all of those pieces into one single networked organizational entity is what I think India is striving towards, and that's where I see the business growing.
Very good. Any comments? Yeah. Yes, please.
Paranjape, you mentioned that you are undertaking 4 C130s in India, maintenance as well as overhaul type of program for next 3 years. Is that performance-based logistics type of an approach that you are offering to India like it is very common in US, or is it something to do with as you need it and charge it on the basis of man hours?
The first 3 years is not performance-based. And again, this is the direction that we want to go strategically, but it will take a while for the Indian Air Force to be able to formulate the principles towards performance-based. And for those who may not know, performance-based logistics is guaranteeing a performance. We would say your aircraft are going to be available 80% of the time, and you pay us, $1,000, and we will maintain the aircraft for that. No matter what happens, we will make sure that your aircraft are available 80% of the time. If it is 78%, you charge us a penalty. If it's 85% availability, you give us an incentive. So that is the model that we want to drive towards. For the first 3 years, because of unfamiliarity with the US manufacturers, the Indian Air Force said, just give us a complete solution, and we will pay you for it for a complete solution. After those 3 years, then we want to go into a performance-based logistics. So after 2014, we'll be entering into a longer-term PBL, performance-based logistics contract with the Indian Air Force.
Any other? Yes.
Having cross-generational employees, like you have actually employees who are over 50 to 60 years old, and then you also have this fresh graduates who are so-called millennials working, and it's kind of posing a lot of issues, at least in this country, in terms of how do they work well together, because they have different behaviors that they exhibit, and this whole concept about millennial generation who fundamentally think differently, they're wired, they're exposed to different things. You hear that a lot in the US. I would like to know really what your take, from both your perspectives on, is that even an issue in India? Because the only age group that you hear all the time when you talk about India is under 25 or over 25, which is relatively towards the millennial generational than over 50 to 60 years. So I'd like to just get your quick comments or observations on, is that even an issue? Diversity, is that even an issue, whether it's come to women, men, multinationalities, cross age groups, and positive or negative, just general comments around that theme.
Go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, so that's a great question. So we'll be hiring, just to set a context, about 40,000 people this year, of which 70% of that would come from campuses across the world. So we have, as I said, 130,000 people. The average age of our company is 26. It's a very young company, which have to be. It's a technology company. So clearly, when we get the fresh graduates post their training, they come into work, there's a lot of difference between how they think and how we think. I've already included myself into them. They don't want to be, so when people join, we give them a BlackBerry, we give them a laptop, and we tell them to get on to their way. And most people today actually refuse that, saying, I have my own device. So they want to be device independent, so you have to support that. So there's a technology change or a technology, how you monitor and all of that. And you still have to make them secure, because our folks are traveling all over the world, and cybersecurity is a huge, huge challenge. We go to campuses, and typically when people came to, when companies came to the campus when I was studying, my first question was, how much are you going to pay? And what part of the world am I going to work in? Today, they ask as to how many women do you have on the board of the company? They want to know what are your CFR initiatives. They want to know whether, so we are one of the first companies in India to sign the UNGC, the UN Global Compact, way back in the, so what have you done about it? You build these big campuses, how much of them are green? So how do you recycle? So you have a set of questions and a set of ideas that people are bringing to the table, which necessarily compels you to respond to them appropriately. And you can say, it doesn't really matter whether we have any women on the board, or it really doesn't matter if our buildings are green, et cetera, et cetera. So we have to make those changes. And our sense is that no matter when we hire all over the world, young people today behave and think very, very similarly. If you look at people in India or people in China, they're probably a lot more concerned about issues of this nature because they see the implications of this not have happened in their country much more starkly than other people who think it's a good fad to pick up and talk about it. So we do business in Kenya, for example. We do mobile payments in Kenya. Kenya is, for example, the largest mobile user in the world from a payments perspective, from a banking perspective. There are no banks in Kenya. And one of the things that people tell us is that, you're making these investments for mobile banking in Kenya. What are you doing for rural folk in Kenya? So how are you, for example, so we use the same mobile devices for penetration, if you will, from a telemedicine perspective. So penetration of medicine, penetration of hygiene, health, et cetera, which is part of what we do. So our business model has had to change to accommodate this. We feel very happy that this is so, because I think this is, a corporation has to exist to do more than no harm, if if that's one way of putting it. And I think that we find that most students, most young people today are absolutely unabashedly insistent that the companies of the world, or the companies that they work for, or they want to work for, or will work for, are compliant on these issues. Gender equality, so we have significant amount of training that we do. We have, whether it's from an anti-sexual harassment perspective, whether it is from a perspective of providing appropriate opportunities, given that after a certain level, women employees have it difficult because they have other compulsions, especially in societies where this is the first time women are coming up in terms of in the organizations. So all of those have to be accounted for, and that's what we spend a significant amount of time. So in short, yes, this is an extremely important point, and something that we see, though uniformly, as a concern for everybody all across the world. So,
Yeah, Abhay?
Okay. It's interesting how there are so many parallels, and then there are some differences too. My industry, Lockheed Martin, we are in the security business, we are in the manufacturing business, and our perspective, the common themes that Ashok just said, where the younger generation has got a different set of requirements, different set of desires, we see exactly the same. We see the same thing, and also I agree that we see it worldwide. Whether it's those people are from India or from the US, we see the same kind of desires, same kind of requirements. Our challenges and difficulties are a little bit different because our workforce is aging. Our average, workforce is probably over 50. Nearly 50% of Lockheed Martin employees will be retiring in the next 10 to 15 years. So we are looking at, somewhere on the order of 60 to 70,000, employees, and out of which about 35,000 are going to be scientists and engineers that are going to be leaving Lockheed Martin in the next 10 years. We are a company of about 140,000 people. You take 35,000 engineers and scientists out of them in the next 10 years, we can collapse. I mean, if we are not careful on how we change to adopt to the new culture and make sure that the company adapts to all of those things that Ashok just mentioned, we cannot survive. So for us, it's very important to be able to do that, and we are actively pursuing that culture change ourselves. One challenge that we do have in our industry is we have such a long gestation period for our technology. It takes somewhere on the order of 10 years, 15 years sometimes to develop an aircraft. So learning how to design an aircraft, learning how to build an aircraft, it takes an engineer, for example, many years before they can be really proficient in designing or building a radar or an aircraft. And one of the challenges that we have had to face is that the younger generation today, they compare our ability in providing a benefit package to what's provided by the IT industry. And they say, we're not interested in, we want to become, managers and directors and vice presidents quickly. We want to understand business development, we want to sell products, we want to design, develop, but we also want to dabble in finance. How do you give those opportunities to someone who's has got minimum amount of experience is the challenge that we are facing. Because you cannot sell a $500 million aircraft program with 5 years of experience. Unfortunately, it takes a much longer period of time. But how do you get that younger generation interested and being able to remain motivated to stay with the company and stay with the industry is the challenge that we face. I've been with Lockheed Martin for 26 years now, and by no means am I an old-timer. There are people who've been there for 40 years. So that's the challenge that we face with the millennial generation, as you said.
I mean, this is a great comments about what you're trying to do. It's a great challenge, but let me share with you what I heard 2 months ago in Singapore, which to me was the ultimate challenge in terms of human capital. In Singapore, there's such a huge talent race for the talent as a resource. So you go through all the recruiting, everything you do, and you get the young person in your company. 24 hours later, he says, I'm leaving with no job. 24 hours, first major casualty. I just don't like the place. Okay? I'm not physically in your building, I just don't like it. I have no other job. Yeah. The next major casualty, they told me, this Ministry of Manpower, is 30 days, big casualty. After 30 days, just leave. Are you experiencing anything like that, or not yet?
No, I think yeah. I think I would actually characterize this as a war of talent. I mean, if we look at India, it's an economy that's growing at 8.5%. Every graduating engineer, she has 4 jobs in her pocket. Everything is a sunrise industry in India. Retail, auto, IT, banking. private equity, infrastructure, you name it, everything is a sunrise industry, and everybody is paying good money to attract this talent. I mean, it's not only the Indian companies, every company in the world today has operations, and fairly substantial ones at that. And it's very true. I mean, we've had situations where the last graduating class from our training institute was told that, you need to send emails as per corporate standard. And their response was, no, what is corporate standard and what is email? We're going to Twitter. And we said, well, that's not part of the practices. This is an IT company. We have practices. They said, no, change your practices, change your policies, change your standards, because this is the way we'll communicate. We'll instant message, we'll Twitter, we will send a text, et cetera, et cetera. So, and people leave for that reason, and people actually, so various parts of the world where people leave for various reasons. Of course, we find that those countries where unemployment is a little higher, there's a lot more stickiness, which is another reason why this is a great time to be setting up centers in this country. We have a center in Shanghai in China, and in Shanghai in China, these are some of the social issues also that come up, is that no girl is going to get married to a guy who doesn't have an apartment. To own an apartment in Shanghai is probably cost you twice of what it would in Upper West Side. So if you do not have an apartment, and if you're a man who's not able to, by 27, afford an apartment in Shanghai, you might as well either move out of Shanghai, because you're not going to get married, or you change your industry, which pays you enough money to do that. And so there are social considerations, there are personal considerations. People actually in India, in my graduating class from IIM Ahmedabad, I think 5 people became entrepreneurs. 36% of the graduating class of IIM Ahmedabad is becoming an entrepreneur, and we're wondering, who's going to work in our company if you all guys become entrepreneurs. So you have those challenges as well. There is a move towards other corporations, move towards being grassroots employees. So the war of talent is actually spread across. Earlier, for somebody like us, we would go into campuses and say, 6 months training, and then we're going to send you west. So it's a big attraction for students in India, is either you go west to study or you get a job and move to the US. Now that we have Domino's Pizza in India and flat screen TV, people don't see that great impetus to actually move to the US. So we have those level of challenges as well.
Okay, there was a question hand raised. Yes, please. And then we will stop with that, or one last question. Yes.
Hi, my name is Shobha Swami, and this question is for Ashok. What kind of work-life balance are Indian companies propagating and developing as part of their initiative to, one of the side comments is to retain people and retain talent. What is the work-family life balance that you guys promote?
Yeah, so I think personally, I think work-life balance is a personal issue, and I think this is not necessarily an area where corporations can do. We follow this. We follow the law. For example, in this country, it's a 40-hour week. It is a services business. It is based on deadlines. It is based on having to complete your work. So people do expand that here and there. But I think what from our corporate intervention perspective is we provide opportunities for people to do other things, whether it is going for an executive MBA. So we have tied up with multiple universities. We provide opportunities for training with some of the companies that we partner with, whether it's a Microsoft or a Cisco. So for them to learn more new skills, we provide opportunities for them to work on our foundation. We give sabbaticals for people who say, look, I want to take a year off and I want to go and help Habitat for Humanity. And so we have a lot of people who do that, or work in inner city schools. So we have that. In India, of course, we do that. We do that in every part of the world. So I think it's the work-life balance, the way we define it is just beyond whether you're working 8 hours a day, you're working 10 hours a day, or it's a global business. So most people are on a plane all the time, and I think everybody's used to now getting onto a phone call at Bangalore at midnight. But what we think are important interventions for our employees is to provide them with continuing education, with the opportunity to enhance their skills, whether it is in terms of technology, whether it's in terms of something else. The opportunity for them to contribute to society, which is very important. We give paid leave so that people can actually take off 2-3 months to go and work on a cause that is important for them. We provide facilities. If you go to our campuses in India, each of them has a swimming pool, so they're, short of a golf course, they have everything that you could imagine, which is not easily available outside those campuses. In countries where these facilities are publicly available, we provide membership to these clubs, etc. So that essentially is how we drive retention. Just so that you also know that we're one of the first companies out of, in fact, the first company out of India that provided stock options to our employees. We don't anymore, but that was another way that we thought was a retention. So if you are being made to work 12 hours, at least you have the opportunity to reap the dividend on that.
I would like to add one thing that we do in India. The biggest hassle complaint has been from employees, and our employees are mainly in Delhi and in Bangalore and Hyderabad, has been the travel time. How long it takes for them to get through traffic and being able to do that. And the second complaint has been vacation time. Being able to take some time off with the family, go somewhere and do something else away from the house. So we have encouraged telecommuting whenever possible. We've given the tools for employees to be able to telecommute, and we've actually increased the vacation time so that we encourage people to take vacations in blocks so that they can take a week off rather than a day off or just 2 days off. Those seem to have helped the most in terms of work-life balance for us.
Let me just, Ishwar, you have a question? Yes. Last question, that's it, sir.
Ishwar here. Question for Ashok and also Abhay. Two different perspectives. This is in keeping with the theme of emerging India, especially a large company like Infosys, which is hiring people by the droves, and knowing that the majority of the development is happening in India, and knowing that the quality of education is still not where it needs to be in terms of the talent that you guys get from the B grade schools and the C grade schools, not knowing that everybody is coming from the IITs or the regional colleges, and also the challenge that you guys have from countries like China. How is the quality of education being influenced or being collaborated with the university systems and also the Indian government, especially knowing that, again, that the Indian political system is not favorable to the collaborating with the US universities and not opening up as such. So I feel that companies like Infosys or Wipro should be doing a lot more collaborative work with the US, with the Indian political system to change the quality of education so that you guys don't have to spend 2 years of your training time, and you could accelerate the whole process of development much more quicker if you can get a good quality of people coming into the doors. So question open for Ashok here.
Okay. Yeah, no, so I think we collaborate with the Indian government on education in a very, very big way. So we have our, we have actually set the syllabi for a lot of schools, not only in India, but also in China. We actually do that in the United States as well in terms of how, from a technology, how technology is going to change the world in some of those courses that we've designed. The Indian government and the Ministry of HRD is actually extremely proactive in its reach out to corporations like Infosys, Wipro, Tata's, and all other companies as well, other sectors, in terms of redefining the education system. So Kapil Sibal, as the minister, actually held his last board meeting on our campus from an education ministry perspective as to how to change, how to make people more employable for the sectors that are actually emerging in India. So there is, but the magnitude of the problem or the scale is enormous. So, incrementally as we do, we will see the effect of that. Again, remembering that, undergraduate studies in India outside of engineering are only 3 years, so you do have to make an intervention to do that. Technology changes very rapidly. In education system in India, it's easy for people to buy the computers than make the teachers come to school to teach. So, we have a program wherein, for a variety of reasons, which we don't have to go into now. For example, the other reason is that parents don't send students to school because that is another instrument of making money or instrument of actually earning food. So we have a midday meal scheme in Bangalore. We provide food for over 150,000 students in the city of Bangalore, so that as a guarantee to the parents that you don't have to feed them, we'll feed them, we'll clothe them, we will pay for their education, just send them to school. it's not only at the, so it has to, it's a problem that you have to attack not at the elementary, not at the college level, but also at the elementary level. And similar thing that we're doing, and I talked about that earlier, we have a foundation, Infosys Foundation here in the United States, which I run, which is focused again on providing education at the elementary and the primary level, as well as participating. So we are tied up with the Wharton School, as I talked, we tied up with a couple other universities. We actually encourage faculty from the US universities to come to India to teach on our campus, and we have tie-ups with that. We promote, for example, Duke University is using our campus this summer to teach underprivileged students. So basically, people who had to drop out of college, so to bring them in for a six weeks training program. The idea, again, is employability. So India generates the largest number of graduating engineers. So if you look at statistics, everybody in India speaks English. There are lots and lots of graduate engineers, etc. Not more than 25-30% are actually employable in spite of their training. So the employability quotient is what we're trying to increase.
On our side, what we started working with the Indian government on was an ability to have high-tech capability into India. Mm-hmm. The Indian government up front said, what we want to do is get the technologies, be able to access the high-tech technologies that Lockheed Martin develops. So what we have started doing is we have a project, Project Innovate, which we have started and have been very successful with, which is a collaborative research project that we work with universities here and universities in India. So for example, the University of Texas in Austin is doing a collaborative research project with IIT Bombay. And so we have students go over there, and Lockheed Martin funds these projects where the research is actually being done at a university level. It's not focused on industry, but it's aimed towards space exploration, developing robotic vehicles, developing technologies for network-centric operations. These are the kind of things that we are doing, where the Project Innovate gives students in select universities in India an ability to work with their university counterparts in the US towards funded research projects that are funded both by Lockheed Martin and by the Indian Department of Defense.
Let me just add that, like Infosys, Wipro has an enormous train the trainer, which means training the teachers, college teachers primarily, a program that makes the graduates employable. And the size is enormous. 10,000 teachers are trained, college teachers, annually. Because first of all, half-life of software is less than 2.5 years, and there are so many applications coming, so you have to constantly educate the workforce, even the existing one and the new one. So it's mind-boggling operation that they do. So I think most of the companies, and I have the same view as what Ashok talked about, the HRD ministry is clearly working with the industry. Problem is that you do have the legacy systems, and this is where I think the comments we heard here is so compatible with what Mr. Jeffrey Piat mentioned during the luncheon or after luncheon thing, exactly the same things, that the mutual opportunities are so enormous. And we still have, both nations have enormous legacies of their own, and how do we somehow either overcome the legacies or bypass the legacies, which in India, bypass seems to be the way out in the short run till the legacies change in some fashion. And education has become a key issue. And therefore, there will be education summit, I think, as it was announced by the State Department, Mr. Piat, for example. So that's one, I wanted to make one comment. The second comment I just wanted to make is that I wanted to end this conference by telling Ashok that professors are not getting paid here at all, We have been living off psychic income for a decade now. 0 salary increases, but more titles we get. So we are now thinking of doing a part-time taxi work, okay, as a supplemental income. But with that, I will close. Thank you again very much. Excellent session. Thank you both of you. I'll turn over to Ambassador Creekmore for closing comments, and then...
Thank you, Jag, and thank you both gentlemen. It's an excellent panel. We could not have had a better way to wrap up this conference. I'd like to just express the appreciation of all of the people involved for your being here today and yesterday. As Holly Semedko mentioned when this conference started yesterday morning, this is the second annual Emerging India Summit. The first one started by the inspiration of some students who put on a wonderful conference with the help of professors in the business school and the Hala Institute and Holly Semedko last year, and have played a magnificent role this year in this conference as well. There are a lot of people that I would like to thank. I don't think I'm going to try to name everybody, but I do want to say that to the presidents or co-presidents of the business school students, Lashmi and Isha, thank you very much for a superb job, and all of you students for a superb job. And the Hala Institute staff has also done a superb job, and I commend every one of them. I think it's only fair, however, to single out Evan Goldberg for a magnificent job. It is our hope and intention to have the third annual Emerging India Summit next year. It is also our hope that we will, over the next years, and have much more going on this university campus and abroad having to do with India and Emory. And so with those words, let me again say thank you very much for being here, and good afternoon.
The preceding program is copyrighted by Emory University.